Good morning and welcome to the Gainsborough studio here at the Felixstowe TV. Last week, you may recall, I did say that the Queen very fortunately joined Eric in reaching her 88th birthday. This week, Sir David Attenborough reached that same milestone. So at least we have three contemporaries. That's Eric, the Queen, and Sir David Attenborough. A very good trio. Anyway, welcome. Last week we were at the point where Eric's extended family were at the point of completing their education, moving off into employment, etc., etc. And this sort of created a little bit of an opportunity, if that might be the word, that in your 70-room mansion you had a spare wing. Is that right?
Well, this is right. But don't forget, we were just a normal family.
Yes.
And our family was growing up like any other family.
Right.
And they were getting married, they were moving on, getting jobs.
Right.
And so obviously, the family shrinks. And
yes.
This is not just us with a big house. It's everybody has the same, and you'll find they've all got the same thing. They've got a house and spare bedrooms, and the children are going.
Yes.
And so this happened to us too.
Right.
And so obviously we had this spare wing, and of course you've got to realise that in those days it was a slightly different position. We were very concerned about the youngsters who, there was a big bulge in youngsters after the war.
Indeed there were.
And of course a lot of these had now reached teenage age, and in those days the boys were far worse than the girls. I think it's just, the girls are worse than the boys today sometimes.
Well, it is alleged.
But in those days, the boys were the naughty ones.
Yes, they tended to be.
And so we thought, well, is there anything we can do to help these boys? Because nobody wanted to know. They were being shoved into Borstals, and they were having homes for them, and it was quite a problem.
So they were difficult
and
children.
difficult, and
difficult
all over
boys.
the country, and it's understandable. They'd been born after the war.
Yep.
They were without parents, or parents who weren't interested in them because of broken marriages, and there was a lot of that. You don't realise the upheaval that the war caused marriage-wise.
Socially.
It was incredible. So we thought, what could we do? And I thought, well, at that time, as you know, I was in the Admiralty Ferry Crew Association. I got my master's ticket in that. I was a skipper in the RNXS. I used to take these inshore minesweepers out, and so I was very much involved with the sea.
Right.
So I thought, well, why not have a sea training school?
What, within the wing?
Within this blank wing.
I see.
So we thought, well, that's fine. We can start off with 6 boys.
Right.
The aim was to get 40, but I thought 6 boys would be nice to start with. So we spent a whole summer. I got a couple of volunteers, and they made phone calls and because we had to equip all of this wing. And not only that, but of course we had to decide what we were going to teach. Now, my eldest blood son, Nicholas, lovely boy, and he was so capable, and he'd just qualified as a caterer, in catering. And not only that, he'd just got married as well.
Oh, as well. Well, that is, yes, heavy.
And he had a lovely wife. In fact, she'd been the head girl at the school that Nick had gone to. So they both moved in, and they were going to be in charge of the catering section.
Right, and this was teaching catering
as
teaching
well as
catering, providing, right.
Well, I suppose they did.
I
suppose they had to food, yes, so I think they did both. So that was, but we had to equip all the kitchens, and it was quite a major operation, which was good. And of course, the rest of the staff also, we wondered how we're going to get capable people. And I think I told you before that I used to take these inshore minesweepers for the Navy over to Holland and round, and we used to have these sea cadets used to come with us. And on one of these, I'd met one of the sea cadet officers. And of course, I speak to him about it. He said, I'd love to come and work for you and do that. So I brought him in. So he was one of the first officers. And there's a nice little story about him, because I thought, well, he's got to have a rank, because the boys have got to have respect for them. So I gave him the rank of commander.
Oh, did you indeed?
So he was Commander so-and-so.
Takes a long time to get there.
The amusing bit is that many years afterwards, I came across him, and he was still using the title.
What, Commander?
Commander.
We used to have lots of nicknames then, though, didn't we? And we don't seem to do that.
No.
Onward.
But at any rate, so we and I found another ex-naval man to head the whole thing, and he had a title himself. I can't remember what he was, captain
God,
or something,
probably.
but God, probably. Yeah. But at any rate, so we had two main officers to do the seaman side, and we had Nicholas to do the catering side and teach the catering.
Right.
So we had a good nucleus to teach them
and
what we wanted.
And you did a bit of engineering?
Yes,
or
we
was
did.
That?
No, we had the three sections: seamanship, engineering, and catering.
Ah, right.
So we got ourselves all equipped for these 6 boys to come in. I can't remember if it was 4 or 6, but it was just a tryout for the first term. And of course that was when we began to find the problems of why these boys were causing problems all over the country. It wasn't just... and so, I mean, the sort of things that we happened, just to give you an instance, they were very responsive, and I don't know whether they had a respect for me or what it was, but just to give you a little instance of many such incidences, they came to me one day and they said, "You know, sir, we listened to every word you said, and we realised that we have been doing wrong, and just to prove it to you, what happened, we'd actually broken into a shop down in the town."
Oops.
And we said we took this suit out of the window, and we brought it back up here, and then we realised that you wouldn't approve of it, so he said we went back and we broke in again and put it back again. so we were making progress, but you can see the difficulty with the localities. And another one, the type of boy, I mean, we did have some very good, nice boys, but there's 1 or 2 difficult ones. One of them, he'd murdered somebody, and he was taken to court for it. He'd been with us, while he was waiting to go to court, and I thought, well, I'll go up to, because he was doing so well, he was responding very well. I thought I'd go up and speak for him in the court. So I went up by train to this Midland court. Shows how things were done very differently in those days.
Somewhat.
And I took him in. And in the court, of course, I told him how he was making such good progress and all the rest of it. And I thought, well, I was going to give a sigh of relief. I thought, well, at least, I've got rid of one of my problems. And then the judge sat up and he said, in view of what Mr. Foti said about you, because I was called Mr. Foti, St John Foti was a bit of a mouthful. In view of what Mr. Foti has said about you, I'm going to put you on suspended something or other on the one condition that you go back with Mr. Foti and do your course at the Sea Training School.
That's a very understanding judge.
Well, he was very good. Well, it showed him, because that boy did actually make very good progress, and I think he'd made a very good life for himself. Good. And we found this...
Who knows, he might be watching this.
He might be. Well, I'll be coming later on how we can tell you how a lot of them did. And in fact, the Sea Training School boys out at sea, or have been out at sea for many years as seamen, so we did do a worthwhile job of work. But coming back to it, this was a big problem. So we realised that, was it right for us to inflict, this was with 4 or 6 boys that were causing this sort of trouble in Arundel. I thought, can we inflict this on
your neighbours?
And of course, my wonderful wife, she's always full of good ideas, and she came up with this brilliant one. She said, well, these boys are going to cause trouble all over the country, wherever they go. If they're in a school, in a hostel, whatever it is. She said the ideal answer is to put them on a ship, because if they're on a ship and they fall out with the
sail away,
just sail away onto the next town and inflict them on there. So I thought, well, that sounds a grand. That sounds a grand idea. So of course I then perked up and started looking for a ship. And I heard that Trinity House...
And your target was 40 still? 40,
so it had to be a full-size vessel,
Well, yeah,
because by the time you've got... It's a big full-size vessel, a minimum of about 500 tons, you know. But I heard that Trinity House, you see, you've got all the vessels coming into Southampton, and they all have to have a pilot put aboard. Now, Trinity House, they had a #1 vessel. As you know, Trinity House, they run all the lighthouses, they do everything. Navigations, they do everything. Pilotage, and so their #1 vessel was the Bembridge, because it was named after the town Bembridge on the Isle of Wight. And so they had this vessel, And what they did, strangely enough, by coincidence, they had 40 pilots aboard it, used to live aboard it,
that's a nice
and it
figure.
would stay out at sea in all weather.
Yes.
And then if a liner came in, they'd lower a ship's boat from the davits and take the pilot over to the liner.
Yes.
He would then take the liner into Southampton, and the pilot would return back to the Bembridge.
We had exactly the same operating here. The sun.
Very good, very good. Well done. But don't take my mind.
No.
You know my age if you take me off what I'm talking about.
But local people will realise what
I see what you
was,
mean. Yes.
So
this was what, and they were cancelling that arrangement because obviously the pilots weren't happy stuck on this ship or in all weather. It's all right in the summer, but in the winter, in gales and what's it? It was, but it shows the type of vessel. It was just what I was looking for.
Right.
And so they were going to put a depot on the end of Ryde Pier.
Oh, right.
So the pilots could live on the Isle of Wight, either rented accommodation or whatever they wanted, and they were taken by a special small craft out to the liners, so they didn't have to live aboard the Bembridge. So the Bembridge was going to be retired.
Oh, right.
Now the Bembridge, it was a very special ship, and it was a historic ship, because Trinity House, being the #1 people at sea round England, the Bembridge was their vessel, so it was the #1 vessel.
Oh,
and just to give you an instance, and you've been mentioning Her Majesty the Queen.
I did
just
at
now.
the beginning of this programme.
Now bring her up again.
I think we should.
Because when they had a NATO procession out of Portsmouth Harbour, all the naval vessels were led by the Bembridge, this vessel I'm talking about.
So should we share what it looks like with our
Just
viewers?
in a second, let me tell you the story. And the Queen was aboard her with Prince Philip, because Prince Philip, I don't know where he still is, but he was something.
Admiral of the Fleet.
No, he was something with Trinity House.
Yes, he is.
He had, I can't remember what the title was.
Master or something.
But Prince Philip was involved. So Prince Philip and Her Majesty were aboard the Bembridge and led this NATO procession out. Now's the time to show what a wonderful vessel she was.
Here we have, by popular demand, I should just get that so you can see it. Oh, look, you've got too much light. What we'll do is
No, that's it, you've got it there. That's
there we
fine.
go. What we'll do is we'll take a slide of this and put it on so you can see the size of the craft, its age, and the fact that it's the #1 vessel, almost like the #1 detective agency.
It's being restored. That's another story in itself, which we'll be telling. But it's being restored now as a museum in Poland, and you can see the size. You can see the size of it by the building behind it.
Oh, we should follow that up then.
That's a separate story, and we might even be able to bring the man who's restoring it.
Yeah, that'd be good.
He's a Polish gentleman, and it'd be very
well
good
done, Poland.
But anyway, to cut a long story short, there was I with a lovely vessel, and I thought, well, now how can I buy it? Because I didn't have any money to buy it, and I was told I could get a marine mortgage, but when I tried to get a marine mortgage, it's rather like getting a mortgage today.
Yes.
It's not easy.
It's
not easy.
No.
And so I had a big struggle, but then once again, my wonderful wife, she said, trust in God. If it's to be, it will be. If it won't, it won't. We had a deadline with the Trinity House when we had to buy it by.
So it wasn't a tender, they actually sold it at a price, did they?
Oh, it was a sale directly to me.
Oh, right.
And apparently, I didn't know this till afterwards, but I had to be cleared. I didn't know it was even being done on me, but right up to the House of Commons and Downing Street had to clear it that it was all right to sell it to me and to the Sea Training School. It was a big operation, but went on unawares. But they gave me up to a certain date to complete the purchase. It was going to be done in full commission, and I think it was 2 days before the final, somebody came up and got me this marine mortgage. So it was to be. It was to be. So my wife was quite correct about that. If it was to be, it was.
So 12,000 then was a significant sum of money.
It was a significant sum of money.
This was in the early 70s.
I might add, just as we're on the question of price, which we bought it there for 12,000, when it was sold for scrap, to be taken to Poland to be restored as a museum, they paid £72,000 at scrap value.
A lot of kit in it, though. So, it's the biggest ship.
But as I say, we bought it. There we had this vessel, and so we were able to get it crewed up. And then I came on the second stumbling block. Right. How was I going to finance running a full-size ship?
No, can I just... Don't
interrupt my train of thought.
But not only did you inherit a ship, you inherited its engineer.
Oh, yes. Now
that's going to be key to your success.
It was, because basically we've got the vessel in full commission. So in other words, we didn't just buy...
certificates, everything done.
Everything done.
Brilliant.
In full commission with the engineer, because the engineer, I think I just mentioned it, he was retiring and he said he'd take the job with us.
Dead lucky.
And we were.
Unbelievable.
If you've read my book, The Foti Theory,
yes,
you'll see there's a plan for everything. So as long as you plug in correctly, you'll get it right.
Yes, okay.
Yes, don't let's go off on a tangent.
We won't.
So we got the vessel in full commission, and then I thought I had the problem, how are we going to run a full-size ship? Because running a full-size ship costs a lot of money.
Serious money, yes.
Once again, it came up. Trinity House were wonderful about this. I can't speak highly enough about Trinity House and their support for us. They said, well, the nuclear submarines were just starting in those days, early 70s.
Fast lane? No.
And as I said, nuclear submarines were just starting, and they had to be commissioned. Now, Trinity House had arranged to, how should I say, what's the word for it? I can't remember. Charter it to vicars who were doing this servicing, and so they said to us, would I like to take it over? And I worked it out. Vicars were paying £400 a day. In those days, that was a lot of money. For
certainly helpful.
Well, it was enable us to, doing this charter for a week or two, whatever it was.
So they were 2 or 3 weeks. That they were doing.
No, I'll tell you all about it in a minute. You see, once it's my old age, I'm awfully sorry.
Well, you are 88.
I am 88.
As is the Queen, as is David Attenborough.
Absolutely. So as I was saying, we've chartered it to vicars, and the whole idea was that we would go up to Loch Finn in Scotland, and vicars had built the submarines, these nuclear submarines, and what they were doing, they were lowering them to the bottom of Loch Finn, with nobody aboard it, nothing running, and they'd switch on each piece of equipment separately. So they'd switch on one, even just down to a little radio set or a little piece of equipment, a toaster or anything, one at a time, and check to see whether it could be picked up by the sonar. Because what they were doing, of course, this was all, the Cold War and all the rest of it going on. These submarines were going all over the world, or going to go all over the world, and to be had completely undetected, and so they couldn't be picked up on anything.
No.
And this was the whole object of the exercise. So they obviously had to have charter the Bembridge, because they had to put on board all their officers and men from the submarine. So they would live aboard the Bembridge. Yep. And then we'd go out every day, and they'd be able to do the necessary thing. Yeah. And obviously, because they were I can't remember what they were powered by this nuclear power. Yeah. They had to have demineralized water, so we had to have a huge tank put on the top of our deck to hold, I don't know how many thousands of gallons of demineralized water, so that they could be operated, so it would be fed down to the submarine, because they couldn't have anything running while they did these tests.
Yes, I'm with you.
So I thought, well, this is grand. This solves our financial problem.
Well, it certainly gives you a good old kick.
And I thought, well, this is grand, so I've got enough money, so I can have I take the ship in and have it done up in the shipyard.
Right.
Refitted, that's the word for it. Have it refitted in the shipyard.
Tarted
up. And I thought, well, jolly good. I'll not only that, but I will hire, some specialised crew. So I chartered a captain for so he had a proper
the whole bit,
and a couple of officers, and so we took it over to Southampton. So this new captain and the two officers and with all the boys aboard, because we'd got the 40 boy, well, not 40, but we had a number of boys, then 20, I can't remember, aboard it, and then I took them down to Southampton.
That should be interesting.
And I thought, well, this is brilliant. So after it'd been there for a week or so, I thought, well, I'll just go and see how they're getting on, because I haven't heard from them. And I drove up, and I could only find boys.
Oh, right.
There's
no adults?
No officers. The captain wasn't there. Never. So I called the engineer, because he was there, but the engineer was as deaf as a post. He was
Sorry?
Pardon?
What?
The engineer, he was deaf.
Yes.
He was a lovely old man, Campbell. Yeah. He used to live on the Isle of Wight, a gorgeous man. Yeah. And, but he was deaf as a post, he couldn't hear anything. So the boys didn't disturb him at all, obviously. No. But I went on, I said, well, where's the captain, where's the officers? They said, well, unfortunately, they've all gone, sir. They've packed up their bags and gone.
This was in the shipyard?
This was in the shipyard.
Right.
So I thought, oh, God, what's happening now? So I said, well, what's happened? Why did they leave? They said, well, after I'd investigated, I found what had happened. That he'd had a lot of trouble with them, because they were very troublesome boys. I could cope with them all right, but it seems other people had difficulty.
Naval discipline.
Well, I suppose this is what it was. But apparently what had happened, he'd come out of his cabin after having had several episodes of this, and he'd found that what they'd done is heard this screaming.
Oh, right.
And what they'd done, they'd taken the youngest boy, the older ones, and they tied a rope round his ankle, and they hauled him up to the top of the mast, so he was hanging from the top of the mast, upside down, screaming his head off. This captain came out of his cabin, took one log, caught the two officers, and they went. We never heard of again.
It looks like a sort of a maritime St Trinian's, but with boys instead of girls.
It was really. But then I got the boys together we had a big cabin, a big dining hall and what's in it boarded. And I got them all together, and I said, well, look, we've got a problem now. I said, here we've got a vessel, no officers, nobody to do it, there's only you and me and the engineer. I said, fortunately, I've got my master's ticket. I said, I can cancel all my engagements and I can devote the next 6 weeks to doing this charter. But I said, are you up for it? Because you've got to look after 40 officers, or not officers, crew, from the submarine, who will be living aboard. We've got to present a very good image to them, and they assured me that they would. And I think it's giving them responsibility. So I then, because I remember what it was, a nice little story there even. We'd gone to the shipyard because the propeller had been misbehaving or something. I know it was a shaft. Yes. It was scraping or doing something, because it was a huge propeller as high as this room.
To rebalance.
And the shaft was like this, and it had to be redone, and that was done in the shipyard. But as we came up Southampton Water, we were going to pick up the fuel from the depot, which is at the mouth of the river there, and we steamed up towards it, and I rang down, because we had the old bell system. I rang down, half speed. Nothing happened.
Whoops.
So I rang down dead slow. Nothing happened.
Reverse.
And I rang stop engines. Nothing happened.
Not connected?
No. Afterwards, I found out. I'll tell it to you now. What had happened, in effect, was old Campbell. He'd gone down to look at this shaft.
Right.
You see, and so he was down this back of the engine room, down the shaft, and of course the engine bell, when you ring the thing, it doesn't control the engine. In those days it didn't. It rings a bell down in the thing, and so you've got a duplicate down below, so the engineer sees it goes to half speed, he then regulates all the engine. But he was down the shaft.
Whoops!
So there was I, faced with this dilemma. Ahead of me was the depot for the bunkers, what have you. Now, I had the choice, and I had to make my mind up in a flash, because I was coming like this at it. I couldn't, the engines were going full blast, so now if I tried to steer away, I'd scrape the whole of the side of the vessel.
Whoops.
Or if I hit it, what would happen? So I thought, well, it's going to do the least damage, because if I turned and scraped along the side, I'd damage the whole of the front of that thing, damage the whole of the side of the vessel, because you've got a lot of weight there. So I think I wasn't doing full speed. I think it was something, but at any rate, it was enough speed. And so I kept it, and we went and we hit bonk, and we got a nice big dent in the bows like that. But that was all, thank God.
Oh.
But it was an experience I don't want to repeat ever again, I tell you.
No.
Anyway, these boys, they were going to do it, and so I picked up 2 or 3 Admiralty Ferry Crew Association volunteers, so they would help me on the way up there.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't obviously, being at work, they were all volunteers. They could only just make the journey up. So they helped me take it right up to Loch Finn.
Excellent, a lovely little trip.
And then we went up to Loch Finn, and we had a lovely pier allocated to us just for the vessel. And it was gorgeous, and they went back, and there was I left with these boys and all these 40 crew of the nuclear submarine.
And a nice little doik in your bow.
Well, that was all right. It wasn't bad. It wasn't too unsightly, I might add. But we came out of that very well. But how we do? Oh, with time's coming on. Yeah. I don't know whether you want me to carry on.
We'll crack on. So
we've got another 5 minutes. So let me tell you there. So we established ourselves there up at Watson. And the boys were so incredibly good, it's hardly true. They did exactly, they looked after the crew. And just let me give you one little incident where I thought they'd slipped. I don't know whether you know Loch Finn, but there's a castle just by the port, by where the ships are moored.
Right.
And one day the police came up aboard and they said, the castle has been broken into. And my heart sank down. I thought, what has happened? Had my boys been at it again after all their promises? But thank God, you know what? They came up, the police went, I said, well, go and investigate it. You've got freedom of the ship. You can go anywhere and what's it. And it wasn't our boys, it was the sailors from the submarine.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. And they'd broken in, they'd been out on a night out.
As you do.
As they do.
Run ashore.
And they'd gone ashore, and of course they'd broken into the castle, and they hadn't taken any. All they'd done was to run the flag down, or put the flag up, I can't remember which it was.
Probably up.
But the castle did object to being broken into. But it wasn't my boys, so my boys were going around smirking.
So did that charter continue for a number of years? Because I take it you'd only be chartered when you had a new submarine coming off the chops ready to go.
But we only did it, I think, I can't remember, it was 1 or 2 occasions.
Right.
Because,
a very useful charter, though.
Oh, it enabled me to pay my way and to do it. Yeah. And of course, just to jump ahead a bit, because we'll come back to this, but not only were the boys so good, but the Navy and the submarine people were so impressed with them that they adopted our sea school.
Oh, wasn't that brilliant?
And I would have brought along to show you a lovely
the opportunity.
The picture of the captain of that nuclear submarine, because we went to the commissioning of it, obviously, because it was all done up when the test trials were completed.
Right.
And he presented me a large photograph of the submarine, and that had been adopted to us. But unfortunately, I can't bring it because I loaned it to the people who are making it into a museum now, and I'm waiting for it to come back.
Better go get that by hand.
But it's just to show you how the boys, if they're given the right opportunity,
always the case,
and they come up trumps, because they catered for them, they did everything, and we'd go out every day into up to the nuclear submarine,
and off you do,
and we'd go alongside her, and the boys would have to cater for all these people. They had to run the ship, and so it shows you what a good job they did.
So how many crews did you have over a period of time?
How many crews?
Well, in that they came, they learnt some seamanship, catering,
oh well,
engineering.
we did it in a series, because I mean we had, I can't remember, 30 or 40 boys at the sea school in Arundel, but they would be
ship and
we'd have aboard the vessel, or because we moored for economy, we moored off-ride pier, but in all weathers it got sometimes very difficult to come in and out. But I had to do that because the Navy, even as a how shall I say, a reduced rate for us. They used to charge us £16 a day, which in those days was a lot of money, just to moor in the harbour. There's a lot of stories, but I think we're running out of time.
We're getting towards the end. I mean, what is phenomenal, isn't it, is that this almost St Trinian on ship was entrusted by the Navy to be its support craft was it used proving trials for its nuclear leading technology in the 70s. And obviously the Cold War did give some opportunities for some boy children particularly who really needed some authority figures to impress upon them. And it would appear the outcome of this is that we've got a number of male adults in our community who live a far better life as a result of what you did and what they did and what those around them
We're very proud we were given that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Yes. Eric, we've got to go. We've got to go. And Bella, you've had a lovely sleep all the way through this.
She always
We're rushing down to see this exciting bicycle ride, the first one ever. And it's all ladies, so we're excluded. We're not even allowed to take part, are we, Eric? So, hope forward to seeing you next week when the sun will be shining, and here at Felixstowe we'll be looking into This Is Your Life, Eric.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.